Before Elden Lord Godfrey, there was Dragon Lord Placidusax, the Elden Lord in the age before the Erd Tree. Placidusax is said to be awaiting the return of his god after they fled, and it's unknown if this was a deliberate retreat or one forced upon them, but Placidusax was of the belief that his god was still alive and would one day return. So what happened to this god consort, and why does Placidusax seem to think that they're coming back? While trying to solve this question, I went down a very deep rabbit hole all about this item. This is the Fingerslayer Blade that Ronnie used to kill the two fingers, and you might be wondering, okay, what does this have to do with the missing god? I'm about to tell you, and this is convoluted, so grab some snacks and get ready. The Nox are the cold-blooded race that live under a false sky in their eternal cities of Nokstella and Nokron. But long ago, in a different age, they lived above the ground. The Nox rejected the sovereign rule of the Greater Will, instead turning to guidance from the black moon that hung above the sky of Nokstella. With this moon as their guide, the Nox anticipated the arrival of their own lord, the Lord of Night, and the Age of Stars he would commence. But as time passed and the Greater Will's influence grew, there was still no sign of their Lord of Night. The Nox grew impatient, and they resolved to bring about this new age themselves. But to do this, they would need a special weapon, a weapon wrought from the body of a god. Utilizing tools to prevent the Greater Will from interfering with their actions, the Nox in secret slayed the god consort of Placidusax and stole away its body, using it to craft their treacherous blade. In an act of the highest treason, they killed one of the ordained vassals of the Greater Will. The Greater Will's anger burned against the Nox, and it was determined that they should be punished for their grave sin. The Nox and their eternal cities were swallowed into the ancient land, cast into unending darkness under a false night sky. But banishing the Nox to the depths below the earth wouldn't be enough. There had to be assurance that they would never be able to harm them again. The Greater Will called into the dark void, and what answered was a monstrosity, a deformed star, a harbinger of destruction. The void beasts fell to the eternal cities, destroying their moon and assailing their civilization. Using a powerful sorcery of the night, the Nox subdued the creature, but the damage had been done. Without their moon to guide the stars, the Nox no longer had a fate. Their Lord of Night would never arrive. And so they remained, a fateless people living under a false sky, eternally awaiting their Age of Stars. I hope you enjoyed my very cinematic introduction to this topic, and you probably now have a lot of questions and/or rebuttals, so I'm going to go ahead and explain to you why I arrived at this theory that the Nox are the ones behind the missing god. So it's never said outright that the god is actually dead. Placidusax seems to think they're coming back. They just went out for a pack of smokes. This makes me come to the conclusion that a body has actually never been found. There's no proof of death, and it's just officially a missing persons case. Now, the Fingerslayer Blade bears a striking resemblance to the Sacred Relic Sword, which you can obtain after killing the Elden Beast, and it's described as being formed from the body of a god, and that it symbolizes a great sin, the ending to an age, or the start of a new one. But if we apply this information about the Sacred Relic Sword to the Fingerslayer Blade, this would now mean that the Fingerslayer Blade also came from the body of a god, and it also corresponded to the end of an age or the beginning of one. Or at least that was the intention behind fashioning it. So why do I assume that the god killed to make this weapon was the missing god consort of Placidusax? Well, the Age of the Erd Tree followed the Age of the Crucible, and the former was said to begin when the Fire Giants were defeated by Marika. Marika not only wiped them out completely, save the one who was cursed to be her prisoner, she also killed their one-eyed god. So you might think, okay, there you go, death of a god, Fingerslayer Blade, Age of a New, maybe it's all linked. I don't think so, because I don't think it would make sense for the Nox to sneak up to the mountaintops of the Giants during this huge war and just say, hey, just passing through, just gonna grab that dead god body over there and go make a weapon of mass destruction, don't mind us. The game is very clear in stating that Marika was the one to kill this god. I don't see any link between the Nox being involved with bringing it down or taking its body after the fact. I also think that to make this weapon, the god had to be ordained by the Greater Will, because The sacred relic sword came from the Elden Beast that was ordained by the Greater Will. We would think the same logic would apply to the Fingerslayer Blade. I think it had to come from a god that was blessed by the Greater Will. And there were a lot of gods and bastard deities in the lands between that were most likely the chosen one of other outer gods. So if the Nox could have just killed any old god to make this weapon, I think they probably would have. I think their end goal was to do away with the Greater Will, or to force a new age from happening, or to prevent the Age of the Erdtree from happening, or maybe it was all of the above. The Sacred Relic Sword says that the weapon corresponds to the coming of a new age, or the ending of one, so it would make sense that the Nox in their rejection of the Greater Will determined that they would just take matters into their own hands. But incidentally, when they got rid of the existing god consort of Placidusax, the Greater Will may have said, "Oh, well, we have a vacancy for a god now. Oh, look at Queen Marika. Look at what she's doing, her great holy work. Maybe she's our gal." And so, yeah, maybe the Nox did unintentionally have a hand in bringing about a new age. It just wasn't the age that they had in mind. I also think that they did end up killing at least one of the two fingers, because the blade is described as being blood-drenched. So I do believe that they used it at least once, and were probably planning on using it more. But an interesting note about the Fingerslayer Blade is that it says it can't be used by those without a fate. And this caveat is the reason that Ranni wants you to kill her brother and resume the path of the stars in the first place, because her fate is very much tied to the stars, as is the fate of the other Carian royal family members. And when the stars aligned, her fate would reconvene and she would ultimately be able to use this weapon. That being said, the fate of the Nox were also tied to the stars, and those stars were guided by their black moon. We know that the black moon was destroyed at some point, and you can find remnants of it throughout the game in the form of memory stones. These memory stones are actually why I think the black moon had to have been destroyed above the ground. Because if it was destroyed under the false sky, beneath the ground, I feel like we would find these memory stones in Shifra or Ansel rivers. You'd think there would be some kind of fragment or proof of this destruction having occurred down there. Also, the logistics of the Greater Will banishing the Nox completely. I mean, taking their whole entire civilization and pulling in Atlantis and saying, yeah, we're just going to go ahead and let you guys go underground. There's going to be no proof you ever existed above ground. Oh, and by the way, you can take your precious moon with you and shove it up your... No, I don't think the Greater Will would let them have that. I think the Greater Will said, okay, we're going to send you underground. We're going to send all of your cities underground. And then we're going to destroy your black moon on top of that to ensure you will never be able to use your precious Fingerslayer Blade again. I actually think that Ranni's dark moon is the spirit of the black moon. It's like the after image, because the one place that you can see a faint dark moon in the game is on the plateau where the Mana Celeste Cathedral is located. And to me, it looks like it could be the after image of the moon of Nokstella that was destroyed all those years ago. So how exactly was this black moon destroyed? Let's ask this guy. Astel, Naturalborn of the Void, destroyed an eternal city and took away their sky. Was it sent by the Greater Will as punishment to the Nox, or did the Nox accidentally summon it themselves? I think it makes more sense if the Greater Will called for the Astel, because they actually have a record of having done this before. The Elden Star's incantation is called the most ancient of the Erdtree incantations, and it says that the Greater Will sent a golden star bearing a beast into the lands between, and this incantation creates a stream of golden stars that assail an area. So not only do we have a prior example of the Greater Will sending down a beast on a star, this term assail, meaning to destroy or assault, also appears on the description of the Wing of Astel, which says that the Naturalborn of the Void assailed the Eternal City. So now you have two items that reference stars and also include this language about assailing an area. I'm kind of getting this vibe of dusting off fingerprints and finding out that they match. This seems like an MO of the Greater Will. The Moonlight Altar Plateau, where you see these two moons, is also located right above the ground where the Astel Naturalborn is located, so I think that this is another big clue that Astel and the Dark Moon are linked. The night sorcery Eternal Darkness does state that it is the manifestation of the ruin brought upon the Eternal City, which at first made me think that Astel might have been something that the Nox did, but I think it actually makes more sense if the Eternal Darkness sorcery was created in response to Astel. If you look at what the spell does, it creates a black hole that absorbs other sorceries and incantations. So I don't think this makes a lot of sense on its own as to bringing about the ruin of the Eternal Cities, but it does make sense as a response from the Nox to combating the Naturalborn, because that creature used a gravity sorcery, the meteorite of Astel, and that item is described as being the manifestation of the power that was used to level the Eternal City. And so you now have these two linked manifestation sorceries regarding the Eternal City and what happened to it, and it just makes sense that this is what the Nox used to capture Astel and its meteorites to prevent it from destroying another Eternal City, like the one at Deeproot Depths, and they put it somewhere that it wouldn't be able to cause any more damage. And you see it here under its false sky in its cavern by itself. I think this is what the text about the manifestation of its ruin and its despair is actually referencing. It's referencing this moment in time when the Nox fought and isolated the Astel Naturalborn. Another big reason this theory of the Nox killing the Dragon Lord's god works for me is the placement of it in the timeline, because you see the Nox creating all of these failed science experiments. They used mimic tears to try and create an artificial lord. They also created the Dragonkin Soldiers, and these are said to have been born under a false night sky, never knowing a true sky. So these Dragonkin Soldiers had to only have existed after the Nox were already banished. And I think that the Nox trying to create an artificial lord was their plan B after plan A failed. They thought, okay, well, we're just going to make our own lord and maybe we'll send him up, or maybe he will be our Lord of the Night that we're expecting. But the fact that they made a Dragonkin soldier kind of tells me that at the time of them doing this, either Dragonlord Placidusax was still revered as Elden Lord, or they were at least familiar enough with a reigning dragon being in this position to where they thought, okay, it would make sense for us to make a Dragonkin Lord. Because further into the age of the Erd Tree, dragons wouldn't have been in vogue. They wouldn't have been stylish, nor welcomed anymore. So I don't see why the Nox would have done that if they were banished after this happened. I just feel like they were kind of behind the times and isolated, being down where they were. They didn't really know what was relevant anymore. So that's why I think the Dragonkin Soldiers were kind of just a failed experiment that at least puts them in the timeline of having killed the Dragon Lord's consort and then being banished right after. So yeah, that's basically my complete theory about the missing god and why I think the Nox were the ones responsible for it. The Greater Will is basically just like, okay, you guys effed around and you're gonna find out. And that was the beginning of the end for the Nox. I actually omitted so much from this video when I was working on it because I had all of this information connecting the Nox and the Carians and the town of Celia and the Black Knives and how it's all related. And it was like 20 pages of notes. It was insane. So I had to just focus on this one aspect of it. But if you do want a part 2 all about the Nox and the Carians and Celia, the Black Knives and all of that stuff, I can definitely work on that. I hope you enjoyed my video. Make sure to give it a and share it with your Nox obsessed friends or your friends planning on Treason. Thank you to my channel members so much for supporting me, and I appreciate you all. If you would like to sign up to become a channel member, you can do so on my homepage. We have a Discord server, and yeah, we're just a really nice group of people. Thank you. All right, everyone, I'll see you next time. Bye.